I am so excited to introduce Haley Moss to you all because she's remarkable, inspirational, and insightful in all of the 5 books that she has published so far. So the first one she published in 2015 when she was a student, I'm assuming. Then the second one she published when she'd gotten through university, right? And then the third one I love, this is the one I read in detail, is about the Young Adults Independence Handbook. And that was how she related how she moved from being a student to being an adult. And then she's been working not only as a lawyer, but also as an advocate for neurodiversity in organizations that are looking to figure out how to get better at employing neurodiverse people. And this is the book she published for that. And then recently, she just published Talking the Talk About Autism, how to share and tell your story, which is, I got to get this one because I need to understand this one better. So, Haley, I am so excited to welcome you to the Art of Adulting and When Autism Grows Up. So let's just start out with me asking, what would change in an autistic young adult's life or their loved one's life if they apply the lessons you're going to share with us today?
I'm hoping for young people and their families is that people come away feeling empowered. I think as an autistic young person, you're at a huge crossroads, essentially, that you have this kind of push and pull of you want to be as independent as possible. And we're told how independence is such a goal. And yet there's also a fear around it. There's a lot of unknown, and we're not really given much of a roadmap other than being told that independence is this thing you must achieve. And families also have this kind of change as well of, oh, my identity might change with being a parent, with having to advocate for you rather than alongside you. Mm-hmm. So I want everybody to feel empowered because transitions are tough no matter who you are. And I think that's something that as I get older, I'm learning too, is that transitions are hard on everyone at any season or phase of life, whether you're neurodivergent or neurotypical for that matter. Mm-hmm. So I mostly just want people to feel empowered to be able to advocate for themselves and to be better communicators with one another. As that seems to be a more recurring theme in my work as time goes on, is how do we get better at communicating about stuff that feels a little unnatural or that's just a very different human experience than somebody else that you're around is having.
That difference it has a huge impact. Mm-hmm. Yes. Okay. All right. Well, you started out there a little bit with rejecting that neurotypical timeline language around independence, which I loved in your book because you just put that one right out there. Tell me more about that.
Yeah, I have this really big belief around this neurotypical idea of independence because we're told that you have to follow this very perfect timeline for everything in life. And that's a lot of pressure for anyone when you think about it. And the more time goes by, I realize that a lot of these neurotypical standards of independence, of where you should be at XYZ age, are very arbitrary. And kind of getting that out the window means that you could set things on your own terms. You don't have to have everything figured out by this perfect age and stage. And independence looks very different for different people. That even when I think about me being an independent human being at this age, there's still plenty of things that I struggle with on a daily basis or don't really have the skills to do very well. But if I tell you that, you might think I need a lot more support or I'm not capable of being independent. Meanwhile, I still run my business. I still have a home, a roof over my head. I travel a lot. I do all sorts of different things. I have a social life. I have a lot going on. And my inability to cook very well or to drive necessarily aren't exactly how you're going to judge whether or not I can or should be on my own or be independent. And I like to think about these things as they don't happen on a perfect timeline. So when I think about something like driving, I'm in my 30s now. It's something I still struggle with. I got my license at 17 after much work and feeling late to the party there. And I've always just been very nervous about it. But that doesn't mean I'm never going to drive. Therefore, I can't be independent and I'm always going to be relying on other people or rideshare or whatever it may be. But I also have lived in big cities. I've taken public transportation. I walk a lot. I do all sorts of things and I still am able to get around just fine. But I also know that it's okay if I master the art of driving in my 30s, and that doesn't make it less of an achievement. It doesn't mean that I haven't been able to have been independent for the rest of my adult life that I've already had. I
Mhm.
think when we look at independence more so is how do we figure out what this person's goals are and how do we support them in getting there is really a big shift rather than you have to be on your own and figure out how to do all these adult tasks. And if you don't do them well, you're going to be under some kind of scrutiny or you failed at being an adult.
Yeah. Here's the quote that I loved. We should be able to live where we want with or without assistance, love who we want without penalty, apply for and hold jobs without fear of discrimination, and participate in our communities without barriers to access. I love that quote from that book.
Thank you. And that is pretty much a summary of what I think about all the time. And a lot of it comes down to personal and it's kind of politics of disability for that matter. So when we talk about where we want to live, who should be involved, what
Mhm.
we want to do with our lives, and how we participate, that really is something that's in that intersection. So I know sometimes in these conversations, things like guardianship show up, or we have different fears depending on where in the world you live or what jobs you're applying for, that having a disability is going to be possibly held against you or misconstrued, or you're going to be judged in some way, shape, or form.
Mhm.
And when I think about community participation, I always tell people you want them to self-select out of things for the right reasons rather than that they can't get in the building or it's not accessible. You want them to just say, I don't want to do this, rather than I can't do this.
I love that self-select. And another quote you had was independence as a strict dictionary definition of not needing assistance is harmful. I agree with you, but tell me why you think that.
Because as human beings, we are naturally very interdependent as a community, that none of us are truly doing it by ourselves. Look at all the neurotypical people. So I know that it is a new year right now, and a lot of us are starting to get tax forms from last year. I know it's not a very fun thing to talk about, but I know that it's something that shows up. And a lot of us probably are not doing our taxes by ourselves. We probably are using some kind of service, or we have a tax professional guiding us through the process. That doesn't mean that we're not independent, right? That we rely on help for all sorts of different things. Maybe you have a gardener in your community or outside your house that helps take care of your lawn. Maybe you need help cleaning your house. Maybe you hire others or trade services and goods with other people because you can't do it yourself. None of us are in this perfect little DIY universe of everything where you're sewing your own clothes, harvesting your own food, cooking your own food, doing all your taxes, having a job, starting your own business, not working with or for other people. Like none of us live in this perfect self-sufficient lone wolf universe. It's just fake. I don't know how else to say it.
The myth.
So whenever I think of independence, it's how do we have the skills to be able to set boundaries, stand up for ourselves, advocate for ourselves, and also be vulnerable enough to admit that I can't do it all by myself. That what do I need help with? And that is not something to be ashamed of.
Mhm. Oh, so good. So good. And then you say, here, at least it's unrealistic expectations. And it can even be burnout and meltdowns.
Mhm.
We don't want that. We want to get what we need without having to go through that.
Exactly. And I feel like there's this thing that happens is as people with disabilities, you get a lot more scrutiny about doing adult things,
Hmm.
that you're expected to do it perfectly because you're so focused on traits and ideas, while neurotypical people don't have that same standard that they're held to.
Mm,
That
good
I
point.
think about it a lot if when it comes to being disorganized and having a messy room, because how many of us can't keep our room or our house clean for whatever the reason? Life happens, right? Or some of us are just naturally disorganized, messy people.
Hmm.
And then for me, I'll get told it's about your executive dysfunction, which at times is very true. But also you're held to this different standard of you got to work on your executive functioning rather than, some of us are just more organized than others and maybe set aside some more time to maybe work on that. That we're just held to very different standards based on labeling and how that interferes or interacts with neurodivergent traits.
Hmm.
And I really think about that with behavior more so that long ago, I had a friend explain to me how it works with intellectual disabilities in particular, that we don't give people the benefit of the doubt.
Mm-mm.
That what they were talking about a kid with an intellectual disability who threw something at someone, and immediately they were writing about how he was exhibiting oppositional behavior.
Yes.
And then if it was just a regular guy who didn't have an intellectual disability, we'd go, he probably just had a bad day and was frustrated and threw a thing against the wall. I'm like, why aren't we giving that same grace to that other kid? Instead, we're just making notes that might live in somebody's chart forever type thing. So I really do think when we have these expectations, we need to be as even keeled as possible and realize, everybody needs help with things. Everybody's independence journey, neurotypical, neurodivergent, disabled, non-disabled, is very different.
Yes, we're part of a community. We all contribute. There are things each of us are good at and not so good at. And interdependence, that's the goal in my mind, is
Exactly.
interdependence. Knowing where to ask for help and where to take it the way you want to take it.
Exactly. And true independence is not only recognizing interdependence, but also having those skills to recognize that and have that communication of going, okay, I do need things from within my community. I do need help with this. And that's not something to be ashamed of.
Not
That
at
it's just
all.
part of being alive, is that we are a naturally interdependent society,
Right.
even when we talk about being individuals and individualism and uniqueness. You could still have all these things coexist, that you could still very much be your own person who is empowered, who sets boundaries, who advocates for yourself, while also still communicating and participating in this give and take with a broader community of people.
I love how simply you put it. It makes it so clear. I love it. Well, that's why I loved your book. So, you know, we don't have to have all the answers. We can ask for help. And that's actually a strength.
Yeah. And it took me a while to figure that one out because I used to be so ashamed to ask for help because I thought that asking for help was a sign of weakness. And it turns out it's not something to be ashamed of, or nor is it weak. I have felt very embarrassed asking for help with basic life skills before, whether it was how to boil a pasta or even just how to do something. And I was not 18 years old when I asked that. I was in my 20s and I was sufficiently embarrassed, but also my friend at the time who I was talking about this was like, great, okay, we're just going to show you how to do it. No problem. Great.
Mhm.
You're going to learn something new. It's going to be fun. We'll practice. And I just was so taken aback by something so simple, instead of just being embarrassed about and being questioned of how do you not know how to do that, is okay. So what? We'll work on it. Not an issue. And there are plenty of things I have helped my friends with. I've been there, the listening ear in different crises. I have been the voice of reason for other advice. I have been able to give different things and contribute different things to those friendships and relationships that have nothing to do with my ability to boil pasta, for instance, for lack of a better description.
Yeah, thank goodness, right? Right? Yeah. There's so many things. There are more things that we don't know than we do know.
Exactly. And that's kind of a humbling exercise, I think, for a lot of people to realize I don't know everything, and it is okay that I don't know everything. I don't have to have all the answers. I don't need to know all the answers.
Mm.
I
It's
feel a lot more confident about that coming from law school, where you do meet people who think they know everything and quickly learn they don't. Because when you enter, you think you really know. I was guilty of this too. So you come in thinking you know everything, that you're so smart, that you're so wise, and then you realize, I don't know anything. Whether it was about the law or just other things in general in life, and and having that humility of, I don't know everything. There's no way that I could, and I probably know closer to nothing than I do everything, really
Mhm,
does make a difference.
mhm, mhm,
It helps you be more open-minded as a human as well, I think, when you're like, I don't know everything. I still have a lot to learn, and I have learned way more in my adult life than I have in school, and that's awesome.
mhm. Yeah, that's the idea. Because it's more of what you want to know. It's not a sign for weakness, but a sign of self-awareness and strength. Period.
Mm,
I pulled all these quotes from the book, from your book. So I just want to make sure that so it's okay to have a village of people to help me to be able to function and run my life.
mhm.
Boy, that acceptance, that's not easy, right? So you first have to empathize with yourself by saying, hey, I know you're scared, but let's try this, right? I know this
Yeah,
is uncomfortable. Well, let's do it anyway. And then in the long run, you realize, oh, I have a village. That's kind of cool.
it really is, and everybody's village looks very different. And also just keeping in mind what an individual person's goals are. So I know we talk a lot about young people who might not want to move out, or they're scared, or they have a roommate and they don't want a roommate anymore, whatever it may be. Is it's our goal to not be like they can't live alone or they shouldn't live alone. More so, if they do want to be on their own, how do we put the right support in place that they're not set up to fail?
Mm-hmm. Mm.
That's always how I like to look at things, is how do we take those goals seriously instead of say you can't do this, or it's going to be so difficult that it's not worth it. I would rather know it's not for me than figure out that it's, I'll never know. I'd rather know and fail than never know.
Mm. That's a mantra. I'd
Mhm.
rather know and fail than never know. I like that. I like that. You had a remarkable mom. She set you up for total acceptance and, unconditional love from the time that you were 9, apparently, right? Tell me.
Yeah. That the way that my parents explained that I was autistic to me really was that huge game changer. And I like to tell this story mostly because right now everybody is really kind of hyped up on language and that you have to say the right thing to be a great ally, parent, supporter, and truthfully, you don't. I spend a lot of time teaching language around neurodiversity. I think language is an extremely powerful tool, but you can also have all the right language and not be a great ally and supporter at the same time. So
Mm-hmm.
I would rather you say the wrong thing and your actions are speaking the loudest. And I say this especially because sometimes, and especially when I grew up, we didn't have the language we have now.
Mm-hmm.
And my parents set me up for success with that, with explaining that not that something was wrong with me, but that something was different, and that different was neither better nor worse. And at the time, I was really into the Harry Potter series.
Mm-hmm.
So having it likened to something that I was interested in about being different made me feel a lot more confident. And the more that I look back on it, I'm going, wow, this was really revolutionary for the time.
It was.
Maybe even still, I don't have children. I don't know what the little ones are going through in 2026. I don't know how we're that far along. But when I was a kid, I really didn't think, oh my gosh, something's wrong with me. I'm broken. I want to be normal. I had that feeling of I wish I were neurotypical because wow, things would be so much easier socially as a teenager, because I think a lot of teenagers just want to fit in. They want to make friends. They want to connect with their peers. They want that social growth. I think that was probably a more typical experience than I would like to admit. I can't just say that I just sat there and said, I'm just going to let my freak flag fly. I am awesome the way I am my whole life, because that is a self-acceptance journey. Is that I wouldn't want a different brain, but I was like, I would be so much happier if some of this was easier. And I think that's
Mm-hmm.
a very rational take the older that I get, but at the time you're just like, I just want to be like everybody else because I just want to have friends like everybody else. I'm going to do all these normal teenagery things. But I don't regret. I don't wish things were different. I think it's more of okay. And realizing that difference was more of a neutral that can very much be a positive has been big. So I like to look at it as a healthy acceptance that I feel very disability neutral for the most part. I am very proud to have a disability. I'm very proud to be autistic, but I look at it as a neutral in my life. I don't know any different. I
Mm-hmm.
can't tell you for sure what would be different about me had I been born neurotypical. I also have a healthy acceptance of, you know what, this is the hand in life I've been dealt, and I'm going to make the most of it. I don't think of it really as a superpower because I don't know any different.
Mm-hmm.
I like to keep that neutrality for me because I don't want to have people have inflated expectations about who I am and what I stand for based on positive stereotyping. And I also don't think the negative stereotypes are true either, for the most part, where people will automatically discount what you can and can't do. So for me, kind of having that difference, neither better nor worse, it's just different as more of a framework for neutrality, but there's still plenty that could be extraordinary and awesome about it. It's not bad, but it's also what you make of it.
Mm. 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 So good. So good. What's this next one? Internalized ableism. Let's talk about that because I definitely see that happen in my family
It's
where,
tough.
yeah, where it's sometimes soul crushing.
It really is. And it's one of those things I still don't quite have the roadmap to how to get out of because I still deal with it sometimes. So, especially if you're dealing with neurodivergent people who are heavily masking, and trying to appear more neurotypical and really trying to do all of that stuff, it can be really complicated. And sometimes you have this internalized ableism that shows up and that you want to be as normal as possible, or maybe you're just thinking, I don't deserve the accommodations. It shows up in a lot of very sneaky ways. So, one way that I was described that it showed up in my adult life was going to Disney parks, and I love Disney.
Mm.
And with Disney's accessibility services, there were years that would happen that I'd be like, I can't ask for this, even though waiting in the lines was so difficult for me because of all the sensory input and the people and the screaming kids that I would have a meltdown or get very overwhelmed. And I would think, you have to brave it out because there's a child who needs this. And you can't take that away from a child. And then the older I got, I was like, you know what? I'm not taking it away. Am I just embarrassed about this? Am I embarrassed to go through the process of asking for accommodations and maybe not being believed? And there's enough access to go around that these big theme parks have plenty of ways and plenty of resources to make sure that everybody gets their chance and everybody gets to experience the magic. So the more time that goes on, I'm like, you know what? If I need to advocate for myself, I can't be ashamed of it. Or the worst thing that can happen is somebody's going to say no. But it is really complicated when you have this affecting your self-esteem in some way, shape, or form, whether it's that you are heavily masking, you want to be as perceived as normally as possible, which is very valid
Mhm.
because you want to be treated with respect. And it shows how much work there is on everybody else around you to be more understanding, accepting, and better educated and informed, more so than you contorting yourself into different human pretzel shapes to get social capital and acceptance and respect like anybody else. And then, of course, it's going to make you feel like you can't really be yourself.
Love your language, contorting yourself into human pretzel shapes.
That's how I feel like it is. You're just like constantly shape shifting.
I love that. And
I
that
used to say it was like being a chameleon.
you, I love how you reminded me of the poem You Get Proud by Practicing too. That's what it's your whole self internalized ableism journey. You kind of described how it went over time, that you practiced it over time.
That poem still makes me cry.
Yeah.
That every time I read it when I feel like I need a reminder, whatever it is, that if I have that kind of self-doubt, that shame or anything kind of internalized against any of my different identities, and it's like you get proud by practicing. Like you actually have to just be yourself out loud.
And next, the last book that you wrote was all about that, telling your story.
Yeah, how do you advocate for yourself? How do you disclose? How do you bring this up, especially if you're late diagnosed or you don't want to talk about it at work or you want to advocate for yourself on a broader scale? Like, how do you have those conversations? And as even for family members, how do they have those conversations? How do you talk to your family about autism? How do you talk to siblings? How do you talk to your young person who doesn't know that about themselves yet? Is
Mhm.
having all these tough conversations. And I realized it was a tough conversation I'd get asked about over and over and over from all different facets of, I don't know how to tell my workplace, but I know I need accommodations, to my 8-year-old is on the spectrum, but I haven't said anything to them yet. How do I do that? Like,
Mm.
or I am starting to date and I don't know how to talk about it with my boyfriend. I've had people say stuff like that to me, and it's like, okay. I am going to do my best to unpack as many of these as I can because it is something I've had to do in every facet of my life, and it can be exhausting. And your strategy for how you're going to advocate for yourself to a manager at work is not going to be the same strategy you're using with your family. That I think it's a lot more vulnerable having these in your personal life than professional life. And having those more vulnerable conversations rather than going in there in my brain with my litigator advocacy face is very different than going in there with my, hi, I am a person, you know me, you love me, you care about me, and I want you to understand this about me.
Oh, just yes. So we have to nuance. It's like there's lots of shades.
There's a lot of nuance to these
Yes.
conversations, and it's really tough to unpack in like a small bite-sized format, which is why it needed a book.
I can't wait to read that one. Sorry, I haven't read it yet.
Don't worry. For me, so my fun fact about that one is that one's my pride and joy at the moment because I got to narrate the audiobook and I've never gotten to do an audiobook before. So if you are an audiobooks person, you get to listen to me talk.
Oh, that's even better. Yes, yes.
And it was a really special experience that made it a lot more fun to get to kind of guide people in my own voice.
Yes, and emphasize just where you wanted emphasized. I just did my audiobook and it's, yeah, I love doing it. I love doing it. It's like, wow, this makes sense. Once I got through it, yeah, that's not too bad. Right. So you talked about all that comes, all that self-esteem and confidence come from within, and also owning all of us
Hmm.
is really what matters.
Yeah. And the more time that goes by, the more I realize you have to own everything. The good, the bad, the ugly, the in between, the things you feel kind of neutral about, the things you aren't quite sure how you feel about, that little questioning voice in your head. I think about this for people who are self-diagnosed. Maybe they discovered something new about themselves. Maybe it's some other piece of their life that, yeah, it takes time. And we have so many different attitudes about being different, whatever that difference may be, that are reinforced to us from the world around us that we don't often just get that time or really go on that journey to sit with ourselves and realize, this is part of who I am. It doesn't mean something's wrong with me. I just need to learn to embrace it or to feel comfortable with it. It doesn't mean I have to shout it from the rooftop, but it means that I want to feel more at ease and at home with myself.
Absolutely. Because the more comfortable we are, the less afraid we are. And so the more willing we are to experiment.
Yeah.
Okay. So this autistic burnout concept, what do you think about that? This, when you were in it, and I'm just assuming you've been in it, how
I
did you
have.
get yourself out? How did you get yourself out?
I feel like getting out of an autistic burnout is a lot of rest, a lot of recharging, and reconnecting with the things that make you excited again.
Mhm.
And something that I spend a lot more time talking about now is autistic joy. So, a lot of the times we talk about all these things that are so difficult for us. And I know that it's a focus. We want to make people's lives better. We want to ease the challenges. We want to ease the difficulties. And something I think you've probably even noticed from talking to me, I'm not sitting here harping on all the things that make my life difficult. That, yes, I can sit here lamenting my lack of cooking and driving skills and different social mishaps and all sorts of stuff. I can sit here all day long being like, this is hard. And it is. I'm not going to sugarcoat it in that way. But it also doesn't rule my life. And there's so much joy in the journey. There's so many things I'm passionate about, and my overall quality of life is pretty fantastic. I have a sense of purpose. I have a ton of hobbies. I have friends. I have all sorts of great stuff. And when I am burned out, I don't want to talk to anybody. I
Mhm.
want to sit in my little cozy nest cocoon of blankets and sit on the couch and play video games because that makes me happy.
Mhm.
And not feeling ashamed for wanting to sit there and play video games because I'm thinking, oh my gosh, I could be doing something more productive. Or even when I was a kid, the girls didn't play video games. And that was something that
Right.
the boys did. Like, no, I enjoyed it. And it's funnier because the older I got, the more connected I got with the things that I enjoyed, regardless of what expectations we had around it, which
Mm.
I think has been kind of a fun homecoming to myself in a way. It's like,
Mhm.
oh, I loved this thing when I was 7, and now I think it's cool again because now I can just truly indulge in it. I have my own money, so I don't have to worry about, oh, is it
Mhm.
something that I have to ask people to let me indulge in, or they're going to have whatever judgment perhaps about it of, maybe you should try something else, or trying to diversify because I know we try to do that with kids. We want them to experience and explore all sorts of different things, or you think we're going to grow out of it when we hit a certain age. So even a couple of years ago, I got back into Pokemon card collecting, and it makes me super excited. I wish I had kept everything from when I was a little kid. I truly do. But it brings me so much joy to kind of reconnect. And I think a lot of that, as an autistic person, is really big. It's radical in its own way, but it's also that stuff that has gotten me out of those darker feelings and that burnout of like, wow, there's so much that makes me who I am and that I genuinely enjoy. And I want to have the energy to enjoy it so I can go back to everything else as well. But
Oh, love that.
rest in the things that make me happy, I think, are the best ways out.
Uh,
And don't be afraid to seek support if you need it, whether it's through a professional or just people you trust.
yeah, who love you. Yes, yes. So it may be an option,
Hmm.
to get some of that outside help. And, just you might need somebody that can just look at things in a neutral-ish way. None of
Yeah.
us really neutral, but, in a neutral-ish way. Yeah.
Yeah, or someone who does not necessarily sit there and judge. I think a non-judgmental way, more so than a neutral, is probably the best way to look at it, is
Mm.
how do
Better.
we get someone who's not going to judge us? Like, I think that's why I always tell people therapy and mental health counseling is awesome, is because it's someone who's kind of there as a third party
Yeah.
who is obviously there for your well-being. They'll call you out, but they'll also call you in or they'll validate you as needed.
Hmm.
But it's not like they're going to go run off to somebody else and spill out your secrets either.
Yeah.
That you just need to find somebody in this world you feel safe with and that understands. I think that psychological safety is a really big thing. I know that it gets thrown around a lot as kind of this buzzword phrase. And I really don't like when mental health gets kind of buzzworded like that, but it's a serious thing that having someone you feel safe with to talk about things or to talk through things and maybe learn something, that's huge.
Hmm.
And that goes for anybody, really. I do think it's harder when you're neurodivergent to find somebody who gets that
Hmm.
and understands that how that interacts with what you're experiencing. So the way that a neurotypical person might feel anxious or overwhelmed or depressed might look very different than an autistic person in burnout or an autistic person who is anxious, overwhelmed, or depressed.
Hmm. Hmm. Good to know all of that too, so we can help each other sort it out, figure out what's going on, and
Yeah.
what to do next, what to try next.
And there's no shame in that.
Mm-mm. No.
I still come from a belief that everybody can benefit from talking to somebody. I was a psychology major in college. That is a fun fact. And I remember walking out of college thinking pretty much anybody can benefit from talking to a professional, no matter who you are.
I couldn't agree more. Couldn't agree
Even if
more.
only for a season or for the rest of your life, however long it may be, I'm sure it benefits everybody at some point in your life.
Oh yeah. Oh, definitely. Well, then the rest of the book, you did a great job of hitting on the areas of life: self-care, healthy, socializing, your own domain, financially supporting and making your mark, the kinds of mark that you want to make. In the book just really outlined all kinds of wonderful options for autistic young adults to consider. Which one's going to work for them?
And what in each place can you work on? And I remember for me, I was so excited when I was writing this because there were things I just didn't know a lot about. That I
Hmm.
was like, wow, how can I ask these questions? So I know when I was thinking about the health section, and I am very honest, I went on a more serious health journey in the past year because I realized that some of my habits were not great. And even starting to do things like schedule those yearly doctor's appointments. Nobody wants to do it. It's not fun. But when you are at the age that you should be doing it and you have health coverage, you have access to care, whatever it may be, you should probably be doing that and get that out of your system. And it's a good thing that now I do wish looking back, though, there are things that now I know that I'm older to start looking for that I would love to help break down. So, for instance, even looking at your lab results, I wish people had told me what any of that stuff means because they just assume you know, and most of us don't.
Mm.
That and getting things explained to you in plain language is a really tough accommodation sometimes to get from providers. But also my favorite thing when I was doing healthy habits was the fact that I am a selective eater for the most part. I am not someone who has always had great eating habits my whole life. I'm very honest about that. And I got to talk to somebody who was a professional about trying new things and how to kind of diversify and make better decisions because that's something that's hard for so many autistic people. And it was really fascinating for me to realize, okay, I'm going in here thinking this is what I want people to know, but I don't have all the answers either. So who can I talk to that might know something that I don't, that I can share with others?
I love that. That just curiosity
Hmm.
is driving you and you're determined to figure it out.
So that's actually a fun skill that I feel like I learned from journalism. So I was a high school journalist and then I did some more journalism and through when you write nonfiction in this kind of self-helpish genre, it is journalism at its finest. It's really just service journalism. And what you're doing is you have to know where your own limits are when
Mhm.
it's something personal to you and figure out who is an expert. And it was the same thing when I was in law practice, is when you had something complicated happen to somebody, you needed to find an expert.
Mhm.
And that's how you got expert witnesses. That's why when you see different like auto injury trials, sometimes you see an engineer breaking down the design of the car and how that person might have gotten that injury. Or you see a bunch of different doctors talking about something. Sometimes you can't just go, oh, you got hurt, my shoulder hurts. You need someone who goes, well, here's what happened to your shoulder, and this is likely why it happened. That so then we can prevent it in the future, or that we can make sure that somebody is made whole somehow.
Mm,
That
mm,
all of these different
mm,
skills kind of come together. And I think that's what's really interesting to me is that there's so many professional skills and life skills that are compatible with each other. So
mhm,
even being a high school journalist taught me how to be curious about certain things. And it was a place that one of my other friends who was an autistic journalist said that curiosity was rewarded, that you could be an autistic
mhm,
person asking an
mhm.
incessant amount of questions. And instead of being told to shut up, your curiosity would eventually be rewarded, or somebody would say something that A, they shouldn't, or B, that's extremely insightful and helpful.
Mm, I love that. And then you made the transition into advocacy work. Tell me about how that experiment went. How did that go? How'd you do that?
I don't think of advocacy as an experiment. I think of advocacy as kind of a natural thing that happens for a lot of us. Is I think so many people want to make their journeys public. They want to help others and they want to feel a sense of community and less alone. I think that's why a lot of people get into advocacy on a greater scale. But I do think being able to advocate for yourself is such a valuable skill set that isn't always taught, and it isn't always
No,
taught well. That
no.
sometimes it's
Yeah.
assumed that a parent will do it for you or another adult will do it for you your whole life. And especially with younger kids, we see it a lot that think of sometimes who goes to an IEP meeting. Sometimes the student isn't in the room, and it's something that if they are old enough and able to understand, they should be there. It's about them. That maybe they have different goals than the adults in the room do. And it's important we listen. That there's so many
Absolutely.
ways we get. So that's why when we talk about families in particular, I always say you want to advocate with the person, not for the person. That
Yes.
it's a partnership. It's a true partnership. Even though it's not always an even partnership, especially when you have younger kids, because there's only so much advocacy you can do when you're little. Don't put an age on that because, everybody's maturity level, understanding situation's different. But getting to that point of a healthy partnership that you could eventually be like, okay, you're an adult, you take the lead, we're here to support you, and be more on the bench than you're the one doing all the work and the
Mhm.
heavy lifting. I think that's a really big thing. And also, how do we advocate for ourselves? How do we do these very adult feeling things and make our voices heard? And there's so many ways you can make your voice heard, whether it's joining a group or support group, whether it's advocating for yourself at work, or even just registering to vote. That there are so many ways we can advocate for ourselves and use our voices for change, for good, or just to make things better in our own lives.
Mm-hmm. Oh, for sure, for sure. Well, let me wrap this up in a self-serving way. Be very upfront about that because this peace process is the way that I work out all my problems, and I advocate that my people do as well. So, I mean, we want to make peaceful progress together. That's the whole idea. So, I think what you're saying is let's pause the unrealistic expectations. Let's get real about the fact that we're interdependent. All of us are, and we're going to have strengths and weaknesses no matter where we go.
Hmm.
And to empathize with the reality of being autistic, that this is there's some things that make it harder, but there are also things that make it more joyful,
Hmm.
right? I mean,
Absolutely.
I love my perseverative ways. I wouldn't be here if I wasn't perseverating on this particular transit, this tech.
Exactly. And then
Yeah.
there is so much joy, and there's so much that I think that I wish neurotypical people experienced because they don't know, like that full body joy that I get. Like when I'm really excited about something, I can't stop moving. My hands will flap. I will have this full body sensation I can't control. And I envy that when neurotypical people like perform that like big smile and that's it. I'm like, I don't envy that. I'm like, I feel sorry for you. If
Yeah.
your
Because
idea of happiness is like, and I'm just like rocking
yeah.
out half the time of my life. Like, no, like, why would I just want that one moment? I want it to feel it
Yeah.
completely.
Yeah, I love it. I love it. So just noticing ours and the other person's reaction. So
Hmm.
it's kind of a two-way street. The whole process is a two-way street. We pause unrealistic expectations of ourselves,
Hmm.
and we also pause unrealistic expectations of others because unless you really want to understand what's going on with somebody that's autistic, most people need an education.
Yeah.
Most
And
people
none of us,
need advice.
are mind readers.
No, none of us are.
I can't read your mind, you can't read mine, and we sometimes try to guess what we think the other person needs or wants, and we can be right or we can be horribly wrong.
Yeah, yeah. And that's where we need to get curious, right? And see if we can't figure it out. And then we, want to align at the form of independence or interdependence with our own values. What's important to us first, right?
Mhm.
And sounded like you did a really good job with that. You just decided what mattered most to you and you went after that and you figured out, oh, in my 30s, I can figure out how to drive. I can figure out how to buy a house. I can figure out all that stuff, right?
Yeah,
You didn't have to
exactly.
do it all at once. You did with what was most important first.
Yeah, and even it was funny because when I was younger, what my true independence goals were as a younger person versus what my parents were expecting from me were not always the same. Is that for me what and I'm very very upfront about one of my primary goals earlier on was financial independence. I didn't want them to feel that they had to support me or worry about me, that I'd be able to manage my own affairs, that I would always be able to make things happen and not be worried or reliant on them because they have done so much for me. I didn't want anyone to feel that I was a burden in some way, nor did I want to feel like I was relying on other people making decisions for me. And I thought, okay, if that's the number one form of independence that I can get, then great. And then they'd be like, we just want you to be happy, or we just want you to feel a sense of purpose, or it's really important that you, whatever it may be, that depending on the phase of life, that was not what anyone expected to be my number one. And I thought that was the most logical number one because then you can go from there.
Mm-hmm.
And I also thought about it, if, okay, if there is a life skill that I am struggling with, if I have financial independence, I can always get help to
Mm-hmm.
do something.
Mm-hmm.
That is how the world, at least in the US, works. That if I can't keep things organized, I can always hire help to stay organized with something.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And that's nothing to be ashamed of either. We
No,
all
plenty of
we
people
all
out there
need help
that
with something.
love to help other people get organized. Plenty of people. Yeah.
Mhm.
And then we collaborate together with, your idea, my idea, your idea, my idea. And then we pick the one that works best that we
Yeah.
can see ourselves do.
Mhm.
Right. And that's where we experiment so that our adulthood is built on what we can see ourselves doing and what we're confident that we can get done. And we just keep going over and over again.
Yes.
And
And it's
getting
dynamic
back
because
to the top.
yeah, like what we need at certain points in our lives are very different. That what I needed 10 years ago isn't what I need now. And
Mm-hmm.
even looking at, for me, even going back in like 5-year increments, I'm like, wow, I grew a lot. I learned a lot of different emotional regulation, or I learned how to set boundaries, or I learned some other adult skill, or I learned how to boil pasta, for instance, or whatever it may be. And I could go, wow, I really did it. And
You
take
learned
those
how to run
things.
your own business. My goodness.
I still can't believe I figured that one out sometimes. Sometimes I can't believe I even made it through law school because I'm like, wow, I had a lot of grit. I had a lot of perseverance at that point in my life that I was like, I need to do this. I can do this. Because looking back, if I had to do it today, I don't know if I would be able to with different pressures and different expectations.
Mm, mm,
And I wouldn't be used to being in school, and it would be a different routine change, and it would be a
mm.
lot more overwhelming of a transition than going straight from college. So I think it's also realizing what you need at a specific point in your life as well.
Oh, that's a good point. Yeah, that it changes. Our needs change over time. Yeah,
Hmm.
certain things are going to be more important at certain times
Hmm.
than at others. Wow. Wow. Well, listen, I want to thank you for being with me today, for writing all those books, and for all the advocacy work that you do. Your clear, compassionate framing of interdependence, especially the emphasis on the self-definition, the sustainability of it, has been incredibly meaningful to me. And I'm sure that as I share this with my families, they're going to be, oh, yeah, that's a good point. We're all interdependent. Your voice just keeps help shifting that conversations from urgency and fixing to understanding and dignity. And I'm just so grateful for all that you've contributed.
Thank you so much.
Yeah. Well, thank you again. And I hope we stay in touch.
Absolutely.
Okay.
Thank you.
Uh-huh. Bye for now.
Until next time.
Mhm.